just let the credits roll, but I'm going to start discussion a little bit at the same time. And thank you all for staying and seeing the film. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll say a couple of words and then I'll turn things over to Stacy, who also has a couple of words. I had mixed feelings about showing it into the group because of the American focus of the film and the fact that it does, at certain points, look like an ad for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Yeah, and that I found that even though it very carefully tries to include a variety of voices from around the world, there are certain voices that are eliminated, including mainly Chinese voices. There's one journalist, but nobody from All China Women's Federation or what have you. It's very mixed feelings about that, number two. Number three, of course, Hong Kong is not included. And I think that I was very moved by the panel earlier when there were many people in Hong Kong who could not go. And there was a lot on the visa denial, but not as much on visa denial as I would have expected. Also, the consequences of the declaration were presented only in positive terms, rather than really going into, at the end, a lot of the continuing controversies around the document and continuing difficulties with countries that won't sign on to CEDAW, such as the United States, and many other geopolitical circumstances that, because of the American point of view, are not included. So I just want to share with you my reservations about showing it. On the other hand, I also have to say I found it incredibly inspirational. Seeing the women who were gathering and sharing their stories and having the opportunity, even though it was in Huairou, having the opportunity to be in Huairou, and there were many women. I was at University of Maryland at the time, and many women in from our university went, and they were talking about some of the difficulties, but also the inspiration of being around women and really seeing the transnational potential of these very local organizations coming together to see a global vision at that time was very important, at a time when there were a lot of controversy surrounding globalization documents that were oftentimes working against women. So seeing the grassroots potential of the other side of these global movements was very important. So once again, the positive was there, but the negative wasn't articulated as well as I would have liked in the film. Let me turn it over to Stacey.
I also want to mention briefly that the idea for today's forum was Gina's. So round of applause to Gina. The screening of the film as well. Again, we want to open it up, so I'll say very few words. I want to think about the importance of historical work here and reflect on where we were in the first couple of hours and where we are now. And remind you that Gina has already begun this archiving through her Hong Kong Women Filmmakers website. So if you haven't seen that, please do check it out. But I think I stay involved in the Women's Studies Research Center partly because of the women that I meet who scare me. If I don't stay involved, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. And I think for those of us who aren't as easily, we don't speak up, although I'm very verbal. I don't do what the women here today do publicly. And I have to say, my arrival in Hong Kong reminded me that that is no excuse, that there is a way to be involved always. And when I arrived, I remember watching Emily Lau and Wu, listening to Carol and Andrew talk about what they were doing, and being a part of this coalition that, first with the green paper, and then what became all of these changes in the legal structure, actually seeing what I had never seen in the US, which was women working across sectors, across socioeconomic groups, across various, sexual identity constituencies. So it was a reminder to me of how backwards in some way my home space was. I also want to point out that I think we do need a film about the Hong Kong moment. 1996 is the logical arc of the film in some ways, but the women's movement in Hong Kong starts earlier and continues on today. I think we're all very aware of the cyclical nature of where we are, not only in terms of the ways in which differences among women often have divided in the 19th century and early 20th century and continue to divide today, but that those divisions between women should not stand in the way of moving beyond them and seeing the larger alliances that we have. And one thing that I learned early on from a woman who was the publisher of Hong Kong U Press, Barbara Clark, who was one of those women who scare me into staying involved, right? And she would say, it's fine for women to argue, but meanwhile, the men are still running the world. Now, again, we're talking about he for she. I think we are in a different place in terms of, hopefully building coalitions among women and men. But nonetheless, we had a meeting yesterday with the senior management team, some of the senior management team at the university. We had hoped that all of this, energy around he for she and what's happening in terms of a rekindled interest in feminism and the very important work that Pooja is doing, that Sarah Eiston has done in her research, that Gina Marchetti is doing on the Gender Task Force in the arts faculty, that Priscilla Roberts has done over years. I could go around the room that Petula's done. We had hoped that somehow all this work might generate into some administrative support for a Women's Studies Research Center. And we were told that, well, actually, there's not really money for administrative support. So people like Casey Wong and Gina's staff at CCPL have literally made events like this happen administratively. So even here at Hong Kong U, where there's this moment of yeasty energy, we're still struggling. So we need to film, we need to continue to tell stories and speak up. But what I can commit to is we'll be teaching the Gender and History course in the History Department next year. Great. And I will use this as a teaching moment, but I invite all of you who are willing, who have not already shared your stories, to be interviewed by students, undergrads, postgrads, myself, others who want to be involved. I understand, Emily, that you are stepping back in some ways, but I hope there's a memoir in the offing immediately, if not sooner. And I would remind you that Adeline Lim's book on the women's movement in Hong Kong, as well as works that have been done by CUHK, going back to Lisa Fischler's work in the 1990s, work that Yi-Ling and others have done, some of it in Chinese, some of it in English. We have a spotty archive, but we still lack a volume on this moment as well. So strange circularity around all of this, but I think there's reason. I'm reading Terry Eagleton's book right now, Hope Without Optimism. So I think we can have hope and move forward. And now I think we'll open it up.
We have a few minutes for questions. If you have any questions or comments really on the film.
Well, I enjoyed the film as well. I think it's a wonderful film. I have to get it and show it to my gender and law class. But I do want to agree. I think that because of the American focus, there's a tendency to downplay the CEDAW Treaty, which is because the United States hasn't ratified it. And for those of you who don't know, one of the reasons the U.S. hasn't ratified it is just extremely difficult in our constitutional system to ratify a treaty. We need 2/3 of the Senate. So that's why we've ratified fewer human rights treaties than the People's Republic of China, which is a great embarrassment. So that's the only thing I would say about the film, is that I think the conclusion that the Beijing Platform for Action is the most important instrument is not correct. Yes. Because I do think CEDAW as a binding treaty is more important, and I'm really glad that the Hong Kong women's movement is very active in the CEDAW monitoring process.
Hi, I'm Amy Barrow from the Faculty of Law at Chinese University of Hong Kong. This is very close to my heart because I'm quite involved, before I came to Hong Kong, with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and around the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, which I feel follows on naturally in many ways from the Beijing Platform and Declaration for Action. You know, that this is a kind of foundation, especially for looking at the situation of women in armed conflict. And I think it's important to look not only as women as victims in this process. So I think this is what, you know, the Beijing Platform for Action really gives a kind of sense of empowerment for women moving forwards, and we can take that and try and run with it as best as possible. But I think qualitative research is really important as well. As a qualitative researcher, I think those interviews with women, and I hope with all of the women on the panel here, I found it incredibly inspiring, because when I came to Hong Kong, these are the voices that I've heard, that the work that I've read. We have to tap into that before it's lost, because I feel like in many ways Hong Kong is in transition at the moment. What are we transitioning to? So I think it's important to capture those voices. Thanks.
Other thoughts?
I just feel that it's a moment to really sort of declare that, as Stacey, you're talking about the need for a Hong Kong version of the film and the text, and I've jotted down in my notes as I was watching the film, we need a Hong Kong commemoration of this moment, and in a way I feel that today we've begun that journey in earnest, and I think listening to all of the panelists, we've got bits and pieces, and there's no reason why, and we've already captured some of this on film, and there's no reason why we can't go far and wide, but as we said, we're really strapped for administrative support. So we're willing and we'll welcome very much any of you who want to be involved in recreating this sort of history for Hong Kong so that we can put something like this together, because it is very, very important. And I want to echo the call that Stacey made to Emily. You must document your journey. I think it is so, so important for those who have this unique place, I think, in Hong Kong, sort of in the memory of many of us in this room. You broke a very important barrier, and it's very important to have that captured somewhere. So I hope that'll happen. So if there are no other comments, Gina, please officially close.
Should we officially close? Okay, any other comments? Yeah. I'm delighted to officially close. Thank you all for coming, and I hope we can continue these conversations and talk more about future projects and future actions. Thank you. And a big round of applause, especially for you.
So you still get virtually nothing.
You're absolutely spot on.
Exactly. Virtually nothing. Confirmed yesterday at a meeting.
We still have a portion of the chunk of money that you brought to us.
So we're so